The religious love to pretend that their beliefs are somehow special because they think a magical spook in the sky said so. And that doesn't actually make any sense to an increasing number of people, but it doesn't seem to dissuade the God botherers from believing it. And that's kind of sad when you think about it. And then they try desperately to defend that idea to the people in the pews, because, those are the only people who would ever listen to that drivel in the first place. The religious love to claim that they have rights to believe as they wish, and of course, that part is true. I would never ever tell them they don't have a right to believe. Nobody can climb into your head and make you stop believing crap. That doesn't mean that your beliefs are God ordained or that you have any more rights to spread them than we have not to be bothered with your nonsense. You can believe what you want, whatever you want, inside the privacy of your head. You don't have the right to force it on other people. I mean, go ahead and talk about them in public if you want to. I can't stop you from doing that. But please, stay away from my front door. I just want to be left alone.
You're in a conversation and someone says, religious people shouldn't be allowed to impose their beliefs on others. Keep your faith between you and your God. What would you say?
I'd say that's a pretty good idea in general. Now, that's not to say that if you find someone willing to engage in a discussion with you on the subject, well, you should be perfectly able to do so, because that's absolutely fine. But the idea of going after people with your unjustified ideas, banging on their doors and disturbing their lives because you've got the insane desire to talk about Jesus every 10 seconds, that isn't going to get you very far. Just because you really want to, that doesn't mean that anyone else is obligated to listen. This is the same reason that a lot of places have outlawed early morning church bells. It violates noise pollution legislation. And religion, it just doesn't get a pass anymore. I can't tell you how many years it's been since I got woken up by the bell monkeys in local churches, and I think that's a very, very good thing. So this is actually a very nuanced question, and a lot of theists, they're really not known for their nuances, are they?
Sometimes people think that as long as the government doesn't regulate what someone says or does inside a church building, they are respecting religious freedom.
Whether you like it or not, your right to swing your arms ends at the other guy's nose. Nobody is saying that you can't believe whatever crazy nonsense that you want in the privacy of your own head. But the second that you try to push that nonsense on others who don't want to listen to it, you are crossing the line. Because religious freedom, whether you like it or not, it isn't unlimited. Lots of theists seem to think that it is, but they're just wrong. Because here's the thing that a lot of theists can't seem to get through their heads. Their faith doesn't override secular society. Their religious beliefs don't mean more than human laws. I know they really wish that they did, but that doesn't mean that they do. This is one of the many problems that the religious, especially so the more fundamentalist and evangelical they are, it's the problem they tend to run into. They have vastly overestimated the importance of their own religion to anyone other than themselves. I mean, it's fine, I guess, that you believe what you believe, but that doesn't mean that I have to believe it too. These people, they really need to get that through their heads.
Is that true? Or does religious freedom protect more, like people's rights to express and live out their beliefs in the public square?
Sure, so long as your religious beliefs don't violate the secular laws that exist around you, because the law overrides what you really wish was true. So long as you're not hurting anyone else, then mostly society's willing to overlook the crazy things that you believe. Now, I think we pander way too much to the religious sometimes, as we may get to later, and I'll leave it until then to talk about it. But so long as your beliefs aren't harming anyone else or exposing anyone to excessive risk or interfering with other people's lives, whatever you want to do, it's fine with me. I mean, it would be nice if you'd actually respect that in others, which the religious often do not, but I'm not going to point fingers if you don't make yourself too obnoxious. Believe whatever you want. Just leave us out of it.
To really understand religious freedom and explain it to anyone else, here are 3 things to remember. Number 1, there's a difference between freedom of worship and freedom of religion. And in America, we have both.
Yes, we do. That doesn't mean that either of them are absolute, though. While you can certainly worship however you like, as long as you don't violate the law. I mean, you can't sacrifice people even if they volunteer to your blood god. You can't violate the rights of others in your pursuit of your freedom of worship. You can believe whatever you'd like in the privacy of your own head or in the privacy of your own places of worship, but that doesn't mean that you get to make a pest of yourself. I can tell you to leave me alone, and you have to respect my wishes. You can come to my door. Unfortunately, I can't legally stop you, but I don't have to listen. I can slam the door in your face all I want. I can yell at you all I want. I don't have to respect the crap that you believe when you stuff it in my face. Your religion doesn't overrule my rights. Your right to believe does not override my right not to. And you people, you really need to get that through your heads.
Freedom of worship is the freedom to believe something, but it's only a small subset of the much broader freedom of religion, which is the right to live according to your beliefs.
Depending on what you're doing, of course. If your religion tells you that you can run naked through the streets, then you're wrong. You can't. If your religion tells you to carry a knife at all times, like the Sikhs do, that doesn't grant them the rights to carry them on airplanes, with very, very, very tiny exceptions. And those exceptions apply to everyone, not just Sikhs. It doesn't permit you to ignore the law. If your religion tells you that you can beat your wife, then guess what? That's not going to fly, even if your wife agrees under religious law. This is really where we start to have problems with the religious when they think that the laws of their gods are more important than the laws of society, because they are simply wrong. Welcome to the real world.
Limiting a person to the freedom of worship doesn't really respect their rights. Freedom of worship only guarantees that the government cannot regulate what people believe in their hearts, in their own heads, in their own homes, and in their houses of worship. Around the world, most people have the freedom to believe what they want.
It is literally impossible for anything else to be true. Nobody can control what's in your head, no matter how ludicrous it happens to be. We haven't yet developed that amazing mind control technology that will allow us to go into somebody's brain and control what they think. You can go somewhere where being a Christian carries the death penalty, as does happen in some Islamic countries, or where being a Muslim carries the death penalty, as happens in some Christian countries, and absolutely no one can stop you from believing whatever you want to believe. You might not be able to act on it openly, but nobody has the capacity to root around in your head and force your beliefs to be expunged. That's just not how reality works. And I think it's hysterical how many Christians pretend that everybody is just out to get them. Because that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this video. If you want to believe in an imaginary father figure in the sky, go right ahead. If I want to like the original Star Wars movies, then yeah, I'm allowed to do that. Live and let live. Unless one side or the other makes themselves a complete asshole. Then it really doesn't work out so well, does it?
But not everyone has the freedom to live and share those beliefs openly. In other words, they have freedom of worship, but not freedom of religion. By itself, the freedom of worship provides very little protection to people of faith. That's why from the beginning, the founders chose to protect freedom of religion in the Constitution, not just freedom of worship.
Yeah, no. That only appeared in the First Amendment to the Constitution. That wasn't the first thing that the Founding Fathers thought of. It only came along later, and it came along with a lot of other freedoms and rights that were granted at the same time. It also talked about freedom of the press, free speech, and the right to assemble peaceably and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It's not like the first thing in the Constitution was religious people can do whatever they want to do. It was an afterthought. Don't pretend otherwise.
Number 2, freedom of religion is God-given and belongs to all of us.
Yeah, demonstrate that if you would, because that's just a religiously based assertion, not validated in any way by reality. And that right there is why these videos are not being made for the non-religious. They aren't being made to convince us that they're right. They're being made specifically so that the already faithful continue to be happy and continue to hand over their hard-earned money to this channel. This is why you have to take everything that these videos say with a big handful of salt, because they aren't there to tell the truth, the whole unvarnished truth without regards to the feelings of the viewers. They exist to stroke the egos of the believers and to tell them that they were right all along, even if they're demonstrably not. Because none of these ideas are ever completely true or objectively defensible. They're just what they want to be so. To a certain extent, I guess that's fine, until it gets in the way of the real world, at which point it often becomes a problem. But they don't want to hear that, do they?
Usually, when people say that religious people shouldn't be allowed to impose their beliefs on others, they're talking about moral issues that have become politicized in recent decades: pornography, abortion, and LGBT causes. What they mean is, on these issues, religious people don't have the right to make laws, ordinances, rules, or even arguments based on their religious beliefs.
Some of that is true. They're certainly welcome to make arguments. They're certainly welcome to have discussions with those who would be willing to engage in them, but they're not allowed to take their beliefs and force them onto society as a whole simply because they have a mindless faith. If you look at history, this is how things have worked. The churches have had inordinate power, and the people allowed themselves to get bulldozed because they didn't want to be seen in a way that would get them socially ostracized. Religion has always operated by social pressure, if not outright military might. Now, today we wouldn't accept that, but back in those days, religions got away with having their own militaries and going out and murdering people in the streets because, God said so, but they can't do that today, at least not in the Western world. So, barring just running around and murdering the unbelievers, which unfortunately happened quite a bit too, but the believers have always used a lot of idiotic, empty threats in the pursuit of their way of thinking. If you don't do what I want, God is going to smite you. Yeah, about that. Because today, people just aren't falling for that crap, and that's causing the religious to whine. Well, we're being discriminated against because we aren't automatically getting our way. No, your arguments are simply piss poor. You are not able to compete in the arena of ideas and convince anybody that you're actually right. People aren't listening to, my imaginary friend says so. And that seems to be the level of discourse that the religious are capable of. Maybe you people ought to do better. Maybe you ought to try.
This view wrongly treats religious freedom as a second-class right, one that's less important than the so-called rights created by the government, like abortion or same-sex marriage.
Whether you like it or not, they're all exactly the same. Every single right out there comes from people, and yours is no different. This is a complete misunderstanding of reality by the religious because they pretty much misunderstand everything. If you can convince enough people of your position using the same method as any other debate, such that you can get them to vote your way, then yes, you can pass a whole lot of laws. And a whole lot of laws have been passed that favor the religious view. That you can't get that 100% of the time without effort, well, too bad. This tends to make a lot of them whine because they just want to be on the winning side in every fight, and they don't actually want to put any effort in, and they don't want to actually be convincing. But reality doesn't work that way. Kind of sad, isn't it?
But that's not true. Religious freedom is not a right created by the government. It is what many philosophers have called a natural right, a God-given right that belongs to everyone, regardless of what the government says.
And that's wrong. Yes, there are plenty of people who like the idea of natural rights, but they don't actually exist. And this is really where we run into problems with the religious. They can't see beyond their faith, and they want to believe that their faith is automatically true, even when there's no evidence whatsoever that it is. I don't care if you want to believe that your imaginary friend provides rights. It doesn't make it so. It doesn't matter if extremist Muslims think that Allah give them the right to murder people who violate their religious dictates. That doesn't actually mean anything. It just results in a whole lot of dead people for not demonstrably good reasons. So, no, God didn't actually do a thing, and until you can prove, with evidence that he did, your claims are empty and absurd. But of course, you're just playing to your already religious audience, looking for influence and, usually, more importantly, money, and the rest of us on the outside, we're just looking at you and shaking our heads, for good reason. Maybe you should just stop making fools of yourselves. Maybe. Think about it. It can only help.
When the founders wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they recognized that some rights are God-given. They recognize that the government's role is to protect those rights, and they recognize that freedom of religion is one of those God-given rights that the government must protect.
And that's why they didn't write that into the Constitution at all, right? That's why the word God doesn't appear anywhere in the Constitution, right? Because this is just you people reading a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't actually appear into the text. Pretty typical stuff, unfortunately. This is just confirmation bias and convenient reading, which is at the very core of every religion on the planet. I'm not concerned with what you believe, only with what you can demonstrate is factually true, and you people are uniformly terrible at providing any of that. If all you can see is what you want to see, then you've got a problem. It's not us, it's you. And maybe you ought to do better.
Number 3. Freedom of religion belongs in the public square because the public square is the marketplace of ideas.
Just like any other idea, yes, to a certain degree. Now, it depends on what you consider the public square. My front door is not the public square. Your right to free speech doesn't override my right to privacy. If you want to find a place and set up a soapbox someplace in public that your taxes are paying for, fine, cool, go right ahead. If you want to insist that everyone has to listen to you, though, yeah, not so much. Your religion doesn't get any special rights and any special dispensations. You aren't remarkable. You aren't exceptional. You are just one more idea among tons and tons and tons of other ideas that are currently floating around out there, and whether you like it or not, your idea isn't doing well in the modern conceptual marketplace. This is just trying to talk yourself up so that your ego doesn't get depressed. It's not helping your case at all.
The public square is where ideas compete and the best ideas win. That's still true, even if some ideas, religious or otherwise, make you feel uncomfortable.
And I think it's hysterical how many theists run around complaining that reality is an uncomfortable place to live. Yeah, too bad. Your feelings are no more important than anyone else's, but that's all you people run on, isn't it? It's exactly why you pretend that you're special, that you have special rights granted to you by an imaginary spook in the sky, because that's the only way for you to get anywhere. You can only appeal to emotion, demand that your fifis matter, and extol non-demonstrable benefits to others who, increasingly, are just shaking their heads and walking away. The most recent Pew survey on religion, the one that came out in 2021, shows that now 29% of Americans are non-religious, and that's up dramatically from the last survey in 2014. Take that in conjunction with the fact that in 2020, that was the first time that church attendance fell below 50% ever. And the trends seem to be pretty clear. Religion is dying in the Western world. The religious are utterly terrified of that fact, yet it remains a fact. And this is just the gullible trying desperately to regain some of their former glory. And it just isn't working, is it?
One of the beautiful things about a society that values freedom is that as we encounter different beliefs, we have the chance to figure out which ideas are best for ordering our private lives and our lives together as a society.
And based on all the data that we have, that isn't religion. If religion was the best way, then it wouldn't be shrinking as quickly as it is. People have asked me when I think religion is going to die. I mean, just poof, it's gone, never to be seen again. And that day is probably never, because people are always going to believe idiotic things for bad reasons. I would predict, though, that by the beginning of the next century, unless something truly catastrophic happens, since terrible things always bring a momentary resurgence of religious adherence, but if things go on more or less like they have been, by 2100 CE, I figure religion will hardly be worth talking about in the Western world. Hopefully that will go for everywhere, but you never know. At the current rate of change, religion will be down to just a few percentage points in the advanced nations. That's not really a good way to guess about the future, of course, but at the moment, it's really all that we have.
A free society encourages people to express their religious convictions in the public square. It doesn't try to silence them. We should want ideas to circulate freely so that we can choose the best ideas, the ones that lead to the most human flourishing, that best honor the dignity of each person, and that address the longing for the eternal embedded in our hearts.
Well, that last bit doesn't exist, at least not demonstrably. I have no longing for anything eternal, and no atheists that I've ever met, they don't seem to either. The rest, sure, and as I said, religion isn't faring well in the marketplace of ideas. The trend wouldn't be downward like it is today if it were. You'd see growth, and that isn't what we're seeing. At least not in places where the religious don't have guns and a stranglehold on the government and can force their ridiculous beliefs on everyone, or they're going to kill them. That's probably why there are some religious extremists right here in our own backyard who speak very positively about that and who want a militarily enforced theocracy, because that's pretty much the only way that religion is going to turn around in the Western world. It's the only way that they're really going to get away from the hemorrhage.
To be clear, all freedoms, including religious freedom, have limits, but discomfort is not that limit. So the next time someone tells you that religious people shouldn't be allowed to impose their beliefs on others, remember these 3 things.
And again, she's just going to recap everything she said in the past 4 minutes, which always strikes me as kinda stupid. If your intended audience has the attention span of a goldfish, and please don't quote Mythbusters at me because I know that already, but if your audience is really that dumb, then maybe you should stop pushing religion and try pushing education and mental health care. Actually, you should probably do that anyway, because if there ever was a group of people who desperately needed it, it would be the religious. Yet this is really where we have to start asking questions, because they don't seem to understand a lot of what's going on. At some points, it seemed to me like she understood that religion was no different than any other position that one can hold, and at others, she seemed convinced that her rights were given by God and somehow superseded everything else in the world. And you're probably going to run into people at both ends of the spectrum at some point, but honestly, I think these people are getting more and more desperate as time goes on. They have to explain to their few surviving followers what's going on in a way that is most beneficial to them. After all, the churches aren't doing well. Lifeway Research, a Christian survey company, did a study in 2020 that concluded that churches were closing at a significantly faster rate than they were opening up. And according to the director of the survey, even before the pandemic, the pace of opening new congregations was not even providing enough replacements for those that were closing their doors. These people are desperate, and as time goes on, they will be getting more desperate. And I just hope that with that desperation doesn't come danger, because most of the religious people that remain, those that haven't walked away, because those tend to be the liberals and the moderates, the ones that stick around are going to be the fanatics. And those are the people who are unpredictable. Those are the people that we need to keep an eye on, because those are the people I don't think any of us can trust.